All right. Well, you ready to do this?
Sure, yeah, I'm here.
All right.
I
Let's.
mean, I'm in your basement. I can't
You're
leave.
in.
So.
That is true. All right. Let's kick this off, and we'll get us on screen here and do my intro thingy. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Cafe BTW, a morning gaming podcast. We were off last week because you know what? I need to have a life, and I vacationed down to San Diego. But I told you we'd be back with a guest. You'll see below. A good friend of mine got some cool things to talk about. It's 8BitSteve. How you doing, man? Hailing from my basement, apparently. Uh,
Yes,
how's it going, man? Happy Saturday. How you doing?
it's going real well, man. Kickstarter funded today, so it's
That
good.
is
Good day.
Well, we are going to talk about that, but Steve, before we get into this cool NES magazine, if you saw the topic for today, we're going to be talking about an NES focused magazine that 8-Bit Steve here is helping put together. Really excited to talk through that. Also, speedrunner or record breaking extraordinaire. We're going to talk about that. I also want to talk about the love of the NES. Nostalgia of retro video game magazines. We're going to touch on a couple of things that relate to a lot of things you're doing, sir. But I always do this. Let's backtrack. Let's travel back in time. And
Ooh.
let's learn a little bit about you and what is your connection to video games? You know, I always ask everyone to share some kind of story that really kicked it off for you as a kid. What do you think that is?
Well, so I've told the origin story of me on many podcasts, but the basic gist is that my brain works in a weird way, right? I think all speedrunners or people who go for scores have a similar brain, right? I have the kind of brain that likes to figure things out and take things apart and understand things, right? Not everyone has that. So when I was a kid, I could read at a very young age. I could read when I was like 2, and so my mom kind of let me do my own things. Like she was like, "Okay, you're smart. You'll figure it out. Like, I don't need to watch you as much." So, my uncle's got an NES when I was 5 for Christmas because we were very poor and we couldn't afford that. But my uncle's got one, and so I got to be babysat by my grandma a lot, and they had an NES, so I just played it all the time. My grandma would just sit me in front of the TV and I just play the thing. So I was playing that 16, 17, 18 hours a day, right? Like an absurd amount of time, and they just let me. So for a normal kid, you're getting 3 or 4, maybe a couple hours a day, right? And my parents just let me go nuts on it. So from 5 till 10, I was playing that an exorbitant amount of time. So that's really where it started. But the real root is because I played it so much. When I went to school, I went to 4 different elementary schools and moved around a lot, and so I couldn't make a lot of friends. Right, so I'd make friends, and then we'd move to a different school, and it would just kind of all start over. So the only thing that I had really was the NES. I'd always just keep playing that, and so that's how I made friends at school. So I'd hear kids talk about games or they couldn't beat things, and I would show them. They would come over, and I'd show them how to play through a game. I just that was literally like the only thing that I did as a kid, really. I would sometimes go outside and play sports and stuff like that, but generally I was inside playing NES all day, every day.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the hours you put into the NES because back in those days, you didn't, today it's kind of normal to hear a streamer play a game for 12 hours on stream, right? Or I think as a kid, like especially for me, my parents had limitations. Although my parents weren't as strict, they didn't know what the hell I was doing. You know, the parents that didn't know anything about video games, but they would buy them for you back then.
Oh
Those are
yeah.
my parents, right? Oh, Genzo,
It's
thanks for
on
the
you.
tier 1 sub, man. 27-month streak. Holy hot dang.
Wow,
27 months. Thank you,
Logan.
sir.
that's
Uh,
almost a year.
that's almost a year. Thank you, my friend. That is awesome. But I would play I think my max would be on a weekend. I would be lucky enough to play like 7 hours or something like that, but during the week I had like an hour after dinner to play. And then my mom would always say like, hey, shut it off and go to sleep. And until I got a TV in my room, Steve, and that changed everything. Then I could like play whatever the hell I wanted. I got a TV.
Whenever, right?
I got a TV in my room when the Genesis came out. So my brother had the NES, Super NES in his room, and I had the Genesis in my room. We had like the console wars across from each other. Not that I didn't like the Super NES, but yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think that attests to why you probably have so many records, right? Because you were able to put in the hours as a kid, right?
Well, it's so as being a speedrunner, high score person, podcaster, all these things, I get to meet a lot of other NES people and YouTubers and people who are in the retro community, right? Guys like yourself. And so I get to hear a lot of their origin stories. So I feel like mine's pretty unique. Like my level of investment in the NES is just so much higher than anyone that I've met, really. And my obsession, and I call it an obsession because it's a passion, but there's a level when it gets to be an obsession, and that's what I have, right? So um, I I need to play NES every day. I need to do that stuff in order to feel normal, right? It's ingrained in my DNA. It's not a gimmick. It's not a show that I make on YouTube for money. It's literally my life, right? I've dedicated my whole life to it,
That's
pretty
amazing.
much.
And
And
Ducks, thanks so much for the sub, my friend. Good to see you in chat.
oh, so much love.
A lot of love, yeah.
Yeah,
So that
yeah,
that's
that's what it is, man.
that's cool. And Steve, we're gonna dig a little bit more in, but I always like to say we got to air out some dirty laundry before we get into the real topics. And I have a few things that I want to talk about generally. And I think one thing that's going to be really sad is yesterday, a store in LA, Steve, called Game Tower was robbed and vandalized. Now, they have two shops in LA. But I need to talk about this just because I'm going to use my platform to send love to these folks. Game Tower is owned by a guy named Elliot here in LA. I'm very close, Steve, to a lot of the LA-based retro shops. This is freaking terrible. His whole store was vandalized. Not only that, everything in the shop was taken. And dude, you could see this cabinet right by the front of the door that had all of his really like CIB stuff and I used to go to the store, very tiny store. But I just want to send love out to Elliot, the Game Tower folks. I'm really sending you guys a lot of love. He posted a video on Instagram last night saying that because of this, they're closing this shop down just because it got vandalized, and that sucks. But today, I'm going to his shop in Northridge, California. Going to go shoot some stuff for them, support them. But I just wanted to send my love. And I'm really so sorry that this happened to you guys, and it really hurts me deep down. And Steve, I don't know how you feel if you've seen stores like this happen to stores, but this is freaking terrible, man.
I have seen not that bad. That's like a whole like gutting of the store. But I think there's an interesting like paradigm here, right? So we have this retro stuff that nobody wanted, right? And then years later it becomes popular again, and we have this old stuff, right? And so these stores, the way that they get this stuff is one of two ways. People bring it in and they trade it in for money, and then these stores resell it, which is totally normal.
Right.
Or these stores actively seek this stuff out on Marketplace or Craigslist or other states, and they ship it in, and then they resell it, right? So the problem is if you have a store like that and you put it into an area, let's say a rich area, you're not going to get as many trade-ins, right? Because those people don't need money for their things. They hang on to their things, right? And so oftentimes you see these stores in low income areas because that's where people really like pawn shop style stuff.
Right.
So you're sort of mixing that in, right? And so this kind of stuff will happen because if you're in an area where there's not a lot of income and people are trading their stuff in, and they go in your store and they see all this really expensive stuff, this can happen. It's very unfortunate and it's terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And I will be honest. So this is Echo Park, California, which is probably on the outskirts of downtown LA. But Echo Park is a type of city in LA that's gentrifying now, Steve. So it's changing from a not so great area. And I was surprised to see this happen, but not 100% surprised in the area they're in. It is a sort of mix of poor to kind of like upscale, like hipsters moving in and stuff. But Elliot, the guy that runs this, he's really a community guy. He does a lot of the retro swaps here in LA. So I'm going to head out to Northridge today. I'm going to do a TikTok video for him. But just need to, just send love out in the world. And if anyone wants to support them, I shared the Instagram in the chat. You could also check my Instagram and my Twitter. I posted about them as well. But yeah, didn't mean to start this off on a down note, but just sending them positive love and appreciation from people that appreciate this stuff. And also, as you can see in the Nightbot, we got Steve's links there. You got 8bitsteve.com, Kickstarter for the project we're going to talk about. And yeah, let's get into you, Steve. So give us a little bit of like, I know you said that you've dedicated your life to the NES. So kind of cue up this whole idea of what is this resurgence of a video game magazine, and tell us a little bit about this Kickstarter you kicked off that you actually, congratulations, you completely hit your goal. But let's talk about
Oh,
how'd you get to this point to create a new NES magazine?
it's a long journey.
Well, we have
Long
plenty of
journey.
time. We have plenty of time.
1 hour. Tell me everything. No, the long and short of it is that I dabbled in a whole bunch of stuff. Right, I've done podcasting and streaming for big retro pages and world records for speed running, high score, just kind of all over the place, trying to figure out what stuff I love to do. And as a part of that, I came up with a strategy guide series that's a modernized strategy guide series that's called The Easy Way, and I sent it out to a bunch of people. I wrote the book. I thought it sucked. I'm like, no one wants this. And then it got published by Hagen Sally, a really large retro video game publishing company. That's the book there. And then that turned into a Fester's Quest book and a Jaws book and a Punch Out book, which is going to be shipping here shortly.
Oh, these are
Um,
cool, man.
yeah, they're super cool. It's we can do stuff now, 35 years later, that we couldn't do in the 80s and 90s, right? We take these ROMs and we can access their RAM and we can understand behaviors and break code down and do all kinds of things that just weren't nobody ever thought you'd be able to do that, right? So as far as Friday the 13th goes, I know more about that game fundamentally than any other person probably on the planet. We know exactly where Jason's going to be, how his movements work, how much damage, all this stuff. And so we take that knowledge and we use it to provide the easiest possible path through the game. The easiest path just presents itself once you understand how everything works.
That's cool. Commodore Chronicle says a video game life dedicated to the NES is a video game life well spent. That is, and Commodore, what is up, fellow podcasters? If I think that's the right account. Great to see you in chat. And Steve, these books look awesome. And I guess that's a really valid point, is like we have more technology and ways to really reference games and the way they were built and the code. And that's really an interesting take. So you're kind of, I guess, you've created already literature around video games in the NES or
Oh
NES
yeah.
games. So what was it about thinking about, okay, a Nintendo Power? I guess your magazine, the NES Pro, is going to be very Nintendo Power, but what got you, where did that start in saying, hey, let's really take this seriously and let's create a new magazine around the NES? Where did that come from?
Well, I think that all the stuff that I make comes from the same place, right? So you have to understand that there are, I don't know, 100 or maybe a couple hundred of people who play NES every single day, and they're developing these things, right? And they're spending countless hours of their life figuring these things out in the games, or researching particular peripherals, or companies, and collecting artwork, or whatever the case is, right? People who are really, really passionate. And I think generally those people don't have a platform to talk about those things, right? Occasionally you'll get Kotaku or or Polygon to pick up something they think is going to get a bunch of clicks,
Ugh,
but
Kotaku. Ugh.
right. Well, what I mean is everything's sort of modernized, right? So there's no direct platform for NES specific content, and so that's how the idea for this came up. I had a podcast for 3 years where we were doing speed running content and trying to bring it to the casual market, so to speak, but this magazine has all kinds of stuff that you've probably never heard of that's super cool that's going on in the NES. The team of people there are super passionate, and they all are experts in whatever thing that they're doing, right? And so we're bringing so much new content to a magazine. So when you think of Nintendo Power, that magazine was designed to sell video games, right? It's going to have advertisements, it's going to have strategies, guides, maps, right? It's essentially a giant advertisement,
And
right?
I queued up a few Nintendo Powers here.
Right, exactly. So, right, this is to get kids more interested in buying things. It's a monetization vehicle, and I think GamePro was similar, but it had more editorial elements and was sort of evolving. And then you got into Electronic Gaming Monthly, et cetera, et cetera. So, for us, what this magazine is it's a community magazine. Okay, people who do things on the NES, whether they've done that in the past, like Howard Phillips or whoever we can interview, people who've programmed NES games before, are currently programming NES games, or whatever they're doing, we're giving them a platform to talk about their thing, right? whatever that is, whatever they're passionate about on the NES, this is what this magazine is about. So you're going to see all kinds of incredible stuff.
Yeah, and what is the timeline right now on getting the first issue out?
Oh, that's like the burning question. Like everyone asks me that question.
I'm gonna ask you it.
Yeah, so with these Kickstarters, as I've been a part of multiple ones now, it's important to keep the expectations low.
Sure.
Because there's lots of things that can happen behind the scenes that you don't know, guys. Like we're making physical stuff, and sometimes vendors mess up. Sometimes they don't hit deadlines, and so we're trying to keep that stuff kind of low key. What I can tell you is that issue 1 has been being worked on before we even launched the Kickstarter, and so we have it pretty far along. And so our goal is to get it out, the first issue out, as soon as possible. We won't get the money for the Kickstarter until the end of next month because there's a 30-day grace period. Okay, but once we have that money and we can pay to print the books, we're hoping that we can have it shipped as soon as possible. And then issue 2 is going to come quarter 4 of this year, and then it'll be quarterly for the following year. That's our goal.
That's awesome. And could you tell me a little bit about? I know we have some recognizable figures here. I know David. A little bit about David, if you could, and your relationship with David, and what he's bringing to the table.
Oh yeah, he's awesome. So he's our editor-in-chief of Nespro Magazine. He's formerly an assistant editor for Retro Magazine, which is a very large magazine. Jeremy Parrish and tons of other, like Pat the NES Punk, and so he comes from that space. He also had a very successful podcast for a long time. He's a successful voice actor. He's done audiobooks. He's just
A
dabbled
damn
in the
good
whole.
guy, actually. I actually know David, so
Oh, he's
I
super
can
cool.
vouch
So
for David. He's a great guy.
he's the first person I called, and I said, "Hey, I need an editor. Can you do this? Do you want to do this?" And he said, "Yeah." And so the two of us started adding to the team.
And then this guy, 8BitSteve, he's not that great though. We don't know this guy, right? I'm just kidding. That's
Look,
you.
this is what I tell everybody. This is what I tell everybody. I'm just a guy who loves NES. I play it every single day, but I'm not in the space where I want to stream it and monetize it. I do it for me because I love to play the NES. I don't need. And this is not knocking streamers. I love that people stream NES. That's amazing, right? It's just not for me. I don't do it for that. I do it for the love.
And I have a good question from Commodore Chronicles, which I love the name. Which format are we talking here, physical or digital? And we are talking both, but Steve, you want to give a little bit more background?
Both. Both. So as a part of my book process, I developed my own publishing company. So I own a publishing company that helps video game people publish their works, whether those are comics or video game books or whatever. And so I'm just starting that. I started it last year. We're just trying to growing it. So this magazine's the first big project for that company. But my Festers book and my Jaws book and the Punch Up book were all published through that company. So it's physical and print. So I have all my own equipment and I can make whatever we need to make, and that really helps the magazine out. Not having third-party access to those kinds of things helps us
Awesome.
keep costs low.
And you know what? I think we're leading into this digital age, but with the kind of insurgence of retro gaming collecting, people are interested in physical media again, and I think that your timing is really good in a sense that I think people would really I mean, the Kickstarter proved it. You guys raised the money, but I feel like people want to hold books. We had Brian Rigsby, who I think you guys are going to include some of his work, who just created a book about video game maps, and also the Rygar book. And he's physically released books. Obviously, they sell out. He doesn't have as much printing ability, but we had him on the show, and I love talking to people that are trying to bring these old mediums back. And I think that the magazine medium with video games was always hand in hand. My relationship with video game literature goes back to the 80s and then in the 90s, when the early days of Barnes and Noble, I would sit at the magazine racks, get a drink, and literally not pay for a damn magazine and read as many as I could, except for the ones that were sealed, obviously, and you couldn't open. But there was a nostalgia to that, right? And I think that you making this magazine is just helping bring back that feel and that nostalgia. Like, I have a few magazines from GamePro to Nintendo Power, but I really appreciate people like you, Steve, that are thinking about how do we bring back these mediums and make them important again. And I think that even though you're going to have a digital side, which is also very important, having the digital magazine available, but printing these is a hell of a undertaking in general, just in this day and age. I mean, how hard is how hard is it to print things these days? It's not as it used to be, right? So it's got to be a little bit more difficult and
It's
expensive.
incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
It's incredibly difficult, and that's why you see a lot of retro video game magazines fail. Because it's incredibly difficult and it takes a lot of work. I've spoke with Brian multiple times. I love Brian, and we were able to include him in the Kickstarter. So we hit a stretch goal that you're going to get 5 sample pages of his maps book. If you back the Kickstarter, you're going to get 5 flat samples from his book. It's amazing. But I called him on the phone when he released the Rygar book, and we've talked many times. Brian's awesome,
Great
but
guy, yeah.
you can see the struggle that Brian has printing his books and
Yep.
keeping them in stock, right? So one of the big problems with this kind of stuff is you want to make something really great, and we do. The same with the Easy Way. The Easy Way guides are the most comprehensive guides possible with the easiest possible. They're essentially master level thesis projects, strategy guides for games, right? The trick is if I could show that to every person on the earth, I'd be fine because I know a high percentage of them or enough percentage of them would buy it. But how do you get it in front of people, and how do you market it in the social media? That's all the stuff that's difficult, right? So Brian's got to sell enough books, and I've got to sell enough books so where I can break even and buy more books and keep the lights on. And that's the part that becomes really, really difficult, is the business aspect of printing these things.
Yeah, and Biff Bufflington says, "Sorry I'm late. I was at an early Asprey ski. Great guest, by the way." Yeah, thanks, Biff, for stopping by. The Asprey ski joke is a Canadian thing. If you go skiing, Steve, after you ski, you say, "Let's go Asprey ski." That means grab a drink after you ski. Just a little fun fact there. But
Okay.
yeah, I think that that's probably the toughest part is in this day and age where everything, even video games, in the most part, are going away from, in my opinion, the next generation consoles may still have the physical side, but I think we're getting to a point where they will no longer have a physical side. Biff says he followed you on Twitter, Steve. Thank you so
Thanks.
much, Biff.
I've seen that. Thank you, Biff.
So let's go a little bit. Now that we're still on the topic, what is your connection to Nintendo Power and a magazine like their first magazine, which you're probably familiar with, which is Nintendo Fun Club News? What's your relationship as a kid with the Nintendo Power series that influences you for this whole new venture?
Well, I have a small story. So I had, again, my upbringing was very strange with the NES. It was very unique, I think. We had what we call here in Michigan a party store. You guys don't know. I don't know if you know what that is. It's basically a convenience store.
Like a
We call
Party City kind of thing?
No. It's a store, not a gas station. A store that sells soda and chips and bread, and just like we call it a convenience store, like from what's that Kevin Smith movie? Clerks.
Clerks. Okay,
Right?
so a five and
It's like
dime store. We used to call them five and dimes in New
Yeah,
Jersey.
we call them party stores here in Michigan. So we had one of those in our local neighborhood. There's this really weird. It's really weird. So there's like a residential neighborhood, and there's no businesses. But right in the center of it, there's this little strip mall that somehow got grandfathered in for businesses, and it's a little tiny strip, and it's got 3 businesses in it. One of them is a party store. One of them is a Little Caesars Pizza, and one of them is a video rental store.
Oh,
Right? And so you could essentially walk from your house to these places, and no other place could get near there because it was zoned that way. But anyways, there's this place called Al's Party Store, and I don't know why. I still don't know. I'd love to talk to Al, and maybe he probably won't remember. But
hold on.
he
Let me
used to
call
get
Al.
he used to get one issue of each of the magazines. Right? He'd get one Nintendo Power, one Game Pro, one whatever. I think he had like a subscription or something. So he just put one of them on the rack, right? And so it would get bought very quickly generally. But I found out what day that those came. And so I would show up in the morning before those would come, and then they would arrive, and then I would go through. He'd let me read the whole thing, right? And I'd bring a notepad, and I'd write down all the stuff and the scores and the strategies for that one book, right?
Huh.
And then somebody would come into the store and buy it, and so no other kids really got to read it. So I had all this information and data in this notebook that no other kids really had other than the person who bought that. A lot of people in my area couldn't afford to buy Nintendo Power or Game Pro, but I read pretty much every issue of it growing up. So that's how my
Ooh,
love
I
for
love that
that started.
story.
That's how my love for that started.
I was lucky. We had a subscription to Nintendo Power. So I remember we would, I would always like, we had like you'd walk in our front door and you'd have like a table where my mom would put the mail on there and stuff. And I never quite, when you're a kid, you didn't really understand dates and timelines for things. So I never exactly knew when the Nintendo Power would come, but I knew, oh yeah, it's coming sometime soon. And I would wake up in the morning, I'm sorry, in the middle of I would wake up in the morning and she would put the mail out from that night. Usually when I would go to sleep, so I'd wake up and I'd see all the mail in the thing, and there was the Nintendo Power, and I would just run down, grab it, and go sit and watch Saturday morning cartoons while I was like, dude, literally combining two nostalgic things together, having Saturday morning cartoons on while looking through my Nintendo Power while my mom would make me a killer breakfast. I was very lucky. But those are my memories of like Nintendo Power. And then downstairs, we had this basement, and that's where we had this really old CRT, and our Nintendo NES was hooked up, and we had a stack of NES games, which, sorry, my mom threw them out when I was in college, so I don't have my original NES games, but
Oh, hurts.
it hurts. But we had this little common area and this wooden table, and underneath the table had like a section where you could put magazines, and under that table was every single Nintendo Power that we had. We didn't throw them out; we would just keep them. And I wish, looking back, I could still see the pile of Nintendo Powers, and I would still like sift through a lot of the old Nintendo Powers just for the hell of it. But man, I looked forward to seeing what was new. That was my internet back then, and I didn't really realize it. And Commodore says, I'm in Michigan too. Video Game Magazine Day. That's pretty much what it felt like. And there is nothing, Steve, that can replace the feeling for kids like us that got to experience magazines in the way they were, because we didn't have access to the internet. We didn't
No.
have that crap. Not that it's crap. I'm on the internet right now. Sorry, internet. You're not crap, but you ruined a lot of the tangible things of my childhood.
You're crap and not crap at the same time.
Yeah, you are both things. But yeah, as you could tell, I get my eyes light up. I get excited thinking about like, especially video game magazines. And Steve, were you into anything other than Nintendo Power? Like, did you get into the Game Pros of the world and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
Game Pro was probably my big magazine. Yes, I read a lot of Nintendo Powers, but I begged and begged my mom to buy a Game Pro subscription, and I got it for Christmas one year. I think it's probably 90 or whenever the first year of Game Pro was. I remember the first issue came to Al's Party Store, and I saw Game Pro, and in my head I'm like, I'm a Game Pro, and they hooked me, right. They hooked me. And so my mom, I think also, my mom, bless her, she's so supportive of like just me as a kid. And because look, guys, I'm not doing like a sub story. It's just difficult to be a different kid, right? Like if you aren't into baseball or football or whatever the popular thing is, whatever that was at your school, and you're not into that, and you're sitting in your house playing NES instead of outside, that makes you kind of a pariah, right? They make kids don't understand that. They want everyone to be the same. They don't like difference. And so my mom realized that I was different and sort of helped me, edge that. And so she got me the Game Pro subscription, and I loved it. I got 12 issues that year, however many they released, and it was amazing. So that's where the NES Pro name comes from,
I love
right?
it.
It's Nintendo Power and Game Pro sort of smashed together
Oh,
to give
okay.
you that feel. But again, it's a double entendre as well. Most of the people working on the magazine are actual NES pros, right? You guys see my list of records, and Slackinator's got tons of records and legacy for all these people. They're doing incredible things in the space and have been for years and years and years and years. So they're pros of that console, and so it's a magazine developed by pros
I
that
love
shows
that.
you all shows all the cool stuff.
Commodore says I had a Game Pro subscription, but I also had a video games and computer entertainment subscription until my mom released it. Was published by the same publisher as Hustler magazine.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Uh,
Yeah.
Good job, Larry Flint. You are a true pioneer. Well, that's cool, and I do want to talk a little bit about just so everyone knows, Steve is a record holder beyond record holder. This guy is
Oof.
full of NES focused records, or do you have other records beyond NES?
I have
Steve?
some other records beyond NES, but over the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 years, I've pretty much just focused on NES stuff.
Yeah, and I'm
If
putting
you,
in chat your records, so you could check out a list of every single record this wonderful man has here.
yeah.
From 10 Yard Fight, which I actually was playing 10 Yard Fight a few months ago, by the way. California Games, Mike Tyson's Punch Out. But tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit. How'd you get into like this, Twin Galaxies record breaking and all that jazz?
Um, so what really happened was I was in a relationship for 7 years, and I was doing
Okay.
the normal things, right? We were going to get married, and we had a house, and I was working, and I just was like, I didn't really have a hobby. I just kind of played board games with my friends every on the weekends or something, right? And so that we never got married, and the engagement got broken off, and I sort of was like, I had a full-time job, and I at the time moved into my mom's house for some months, so I had like unlimited money and unlimited time to kind of do whatever I wanted. I didn't have any kids, so I just thought like, what should I do with my life, right? And the two things that I always loved were I loved music as a kid. I was in a lot of bands, and I hadn't done that in a long time. And I loved NES, and I said, hey, this is right around the time when GDQ was just starting out and speedrunning was just kind of taking off, and so I thought, hey, let me just look up stuff like who's good at NES. Like, let's find all the most famous NES people. Like, what are people doing in NES, right? And so what happened was I found Funk Doc and Sinister One and all these guys doing like one of the first videos I watched was Funk Doc doing a Castlevania 3 Deathless run live,
Whoa.
and I watched Sinister One play Ninja Gaiden Pacifist, where he didn't slash with the sword except on bosses, right? And it just kind of like leveled my mind. I was like, wow, I thought I was good at this stuff, but these guys are doing stuff way beyond what I thought was even possible. So that's what got me into this kind of thing.
And
But go ahead.
oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say the reality was is when that time happened, I sucked. Right, like the console knowledge and experience and skill level had far surpassed anything that I had done in my life. So I was horrible compared to them. Right, but so what I did was is I picked 10 NES games. And this is because again I had nothing else going on in my life. So I would go to work, I would come home. I started on January 1st. I picked 10 NES games, and I tried to beat all 10 of those games every day. I did that for 365 consecutive days. So I picked some of the hardest games that you can think of: Ninja Gaiden, Battletoads, Ghosts and Goblins, Castlevania, Jaws, Karate Kid, Turtles. Right, so just Silver Surfer was one of them. I don't remember the 10th one, but so I tried to beat those, and I got my butt whooped. But over time, I started to learn more. I started to research the games more, and eventually I could beat all 10 of them in a stretch of some hours. And I'd come home from work and I'd beat all 10, and then I'd go to bed. And I'd come
Wow.
home and I'd beat all 10, and I'd go to bed, and it just got faster and faster and better and better and better. And the cool thing about the NES is a lot of skills for certain genres are transferable because the programming is similar. A lot of that stuff was copied. So if you can get really good at Ghosts and Goblins or Battletoads, you can get good at other agility-based platformers. If you can get good at Silver Surfer, you can get good at other shumps pretty quickly. And so,
Yeah, and I'm very impressed, and I did queue up a few of your favorites. I'd love to talk about. What is it about 1942? Is it 42? Yeah,
yeah.
that you were. What did you do in 1942, and why do you like this
Oof.
record so much?
Well, okay, so there's a guy named Tom Vodova, and I try to talk about him on every podcast I'm on. He is, I consider the best NES player that I've ever seen in the world. He retired about 5 or 6 years ago. His family now and kids, but he's done some really incredible things on the NES. Something to keep in mind is that Twin Galaxies was formed late 70s, early 80s before the NES even
With the
came out.
wonderful, I queued him up. Where is he? Walter Day.
Walter Day, right?
Here he
So
is. Here he
yeah,
is.
Walter Day. So NES scores have been being tracked there far before speedrunning became a thing. It's the oldest NES achievement tracking place, and so Tom was doing stuff in 2004, right? And he started his rise 2004. 1942 was one of his records. So anytime that and I talk to Tom He's really friendly. He loves that I go after his records. He's very supportive of me. So I've been trying to get to the top of the Twin Galaxies rating system for about 3 years. I'm still not there because Tom is just so high up there. But this was one of his records that I finally broke, and this took me months to finally break his 1942 record.
And what is the record?
I don't know the actual score. It's like a little over 2 million. I
Oh,
think
so
it's
it's a
two
high
point.
score record.
Oh, it's high score for sure.
Sweet.
I like score better. It's just me personally. I think it matches better with the console. For example, 1942 was programmed with score in mind. The programmers thought of it. They came up with values, right? They put time into figuring out how the scoring system was going to work. If you try to speed run 1942, the game just wasn't designed that way. It wasn't. It doesn't fit perfectly or as well, in my opinion. You can do it. You can speed run anything, which is why it's so popular and successful and entertaining, right? But score is not as flashy. It's sort of long. It's boring. You're intentionally dying to maximize points, and so that's why it doesn't do as well on Twitch and stuff, and why I don't stream a lot of it because it's kind of boring. No one wants to watch me play 1942 for an hour and a half, right? And I'm okay with that. Like I like to do it, so I do it. But yeah, that's really what it is. It's just I wanted to. I pick some of Tom's records sometimes, and I try to go after them. It makes me feel good if I can get to his level because he's in the stratosphere skill wise.
Tell us a little bit about Castlevania.
That's an interesting one. So that particular variant record is a one life record. So you have to beat the entire game without dying. And then it's the highest score for one loop. So Castlevania actually loops multiple times. You can play it infinitely, and keep your score. And there's another track for that where it's literally a marathon. How many times can you loop Castlevania and not want to be a normal person afterwards? Let's say, right? So this is a one life variant, which I like a lot better. And this is all about maximizing an effect that the special weapons have. So the special weapons in that game have a bonus multiplier. If you throw a holy water or a firebomb, as it's called in the manual, which a lot of people don't know, if you throw that and you kill multiple enemies with it, you get a bonus. You get 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, and then 8,000, 8,000, 8,000, 8,000, right? So if you throw one holy water and you kill 6 enemies, you get a huge bonus stack. You can also do it with the Holy Cross, which if you watch that record, you'll see me do that in stage 2, I think. But it's a really, really fun thing.
Jan has a question for you. I guess I haven't thought about intentionally dying in order to get more points. Is mostly happens because enemies respawn?
It depends. So there's a couple things to note about score. It's kind of complex. So there's a thing called leeching, and then there's a thing called point pressing, and sometimes those can get confusing as to the difference between those two things. If you're playing a game that has a timer, which you do in Castlevania, then it's called point pressing. You're trying to maximize the number of points that you can get in a level before it kills you, right? In that particular variant, I only have one life, so it doesn't really matter. I can't die intentionally because then my score stops. But there's a in the NES Pro first issue. I do a whole score spread talking about this stuff and breaking down all these concepts for score as it applies to the NES because a lot of people don't know. But Twin Galaxies has a thing called Twin Galaxies tournament settings, which only gives you 5 lives. So typically, when you're talking about point pressing or score maximizing, you're talking about 5 lives. If there's a track that has unlimited lives, it's highly frowned upon to die intentionally over and over and over again. That's called leeching. Especially when you get into a scenario where you can just infinitely gain points and there's really no danger for you. That's frowned upon. But it's very complex to like apply and understand. But that's why I went with the Castlevania One Life because it just takes all the thinking out of it. I just don't die, get as many points as I can.
Oh, that's cool and good information that I don't. I'm not much. I'm a fan of speedrunning and I love and support it, but I don't know much about it, record breaking and stuff. But what about Narc, which is a game I played in the arcade a ton as a kid, to be honest. What is the record in Narc that you have? Another high score?
Yeah, high score. I think I think that's close to 2 million as well. So all these games that I'm playing are also all games that I had as a kid. So 1942 is certainly a game that I had. Narc is one of my favorite games, right? So I try to play games that I like. for the most part. Sometimes I'll play a game that had just is worth a lot of rating points, or some other player who I think is really good has, just to see if I can get to that level. But Narc's one of those that I just loved as a kid.
Yeah, me too.
It's a really fun game. The controls on the NES are a little wonky compared to the arcade. The arcade version is much better, but I think this is a pretty decent port overall.
Yeah.
Um, mhm.
I have it today. I should probably pull it out and play it. But Jan says thank you for the explanation, but he says leeches have a use. We give them such a negative connotation. That's true, Jan. But he thanks you for the explanation, Steve. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
of course.
I'm gonna queue up another one that you mentioned that are kind of like your favorites. Here's one that maybe not a lot of people have played before, and one that one that people forget is Stinger. Um,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful looking game too, kind of fun.
So this is a Capcom game, which a lot of people don't know. It's really beautifully programmed, very good controls. There are no known glitches that I know of. It's great. So my mom used to go again. Grew up very poor in a very poor suburb of Detroit, and so my mom used to have to buy games from bargain bins. So she'd go to Blockbuster or wherever had bargain bins, Target. Toys R Us, whatever, and she'd buy games like this that no one was buying for $5 or $10, right? And so Stinger was one of those games that just nobody really, it never really caught on locally here. So that's why how I got Narc and how I got 1942, and you'd often see shumps or shoot 'em ups. I'm sorry, shmups in
Shmups.
in uh, in those bargain bins, and so Stinger was one of those. That's why I played it a lot as a kid.
Biff says I was married to one for a couple decades. Absolutely beautiful leash. All right, another one, which is one people don't talk too much about, is Wrath of the Black Manta.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about this one.
It's the ninja craze, right? So I think Ninja Gaiden is, the flagship ninja product on the NES, but there's plenty of other ninja games on the console. Early '90s, late '80s, ninjas was wherever. American
I
Ninja,
remember that.
everything
Was
was ninja.
Ninja
Right?
Turtles.
Ninja Turtles,
You
right?
know,
Battletoads were basically ninjas, like Samurai Pizza Cats. Everything was
don't
like that. So
forget Surf Ninjas and Three Ninjas,
the
and
three ninjas, yeah. Uh, so this is a different style game. It's a platformer, but it's not as like action based. It's more technical. And I had this because it was in the bargain bin and no one would buy it. So I had this as a kid. So I just looked at the score and did maximized it, used my brain to figure out the best way to get the highest score I could. But I love this game. I mean I like Ninja Gaiden as well, but
it's a
this
good
one
one.
shares. It's fun.
I haven't.
It's
I don't think I have this one. I need to look at this one. I need to find this one. Is it pricey, this one, these days? Or?
no,
No, it's not, right? I
no,
figured.
it's $5-10.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta add this to the collection. Awesome. Let me pull up as we're in the back nine of the show. It's been awesome, man. So let's talk about Back to the Future.
Oof. Ouch. So,
I remember
for
this
those
game,
for those
man.
of you out there, I would recommend not playing this game. It is not very fun. It's very punishing and unforgiving. It's one of the harder NES games. I went after this game because it was worth a lot of rating points. And again, still trying to. Last 2 years consecutively, I've been trying to climb to the top of the Twin Galaxies NES ranking board. I'm currently fourth, and this was just worth a lot of rating points. So this was a really tough one to do. It's hard to maximize the score in this game.
What a crappy game. Like,
Yeah.
I really was so disappointed. Is this an LGN game? By
Oh
the way?
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I think this would be a fine game if it didn't have a movie license on it. Like if it just had some other format. And a lot of these really hard games, there's two things. If you have some knowledge, a lot of times it makes them really easy, right? That's a big thing. But the second biggest thing is sometimes there's like one or two little specific things that just make the game really hard that they didn't need to have. Like in Friday the 13th, for example, fighting Jason inside a cabin is infinitely too hard on day
Right.
3, and that's the only thing that made people not beat it. This game is all about these stages here. These walking stages are just too difficult. You have things shooting at you from different angles. You have enemies swirling around you, and a 5 to 8 year old kid is not going to have the dexterity or the patience to like play this long term.
Terrible. And the hula hoop lady, man, what the hell? Commodore says, "Ouch is right. It's brutal and awful." And then Biff says, "Still better than Ghostbusters on the Commodore 64. Sorry, not sorry."
Truth. That's truth.
Cool. And then I guess as we're in the back end, I did something interesting, Steve, on Twitter. Is I asked, "What was your and let me pull this up. What was your connection to video game magazines as a kid?" And I asked the Twitterverse. You know, I always try to think of a clever question that relates to the actual topics at hand. And yeah, thanks so much for telling us about how awesome you are at video games. By the way, really
It's
appreciate it.
I just want to point something out, guys.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
um, this a lot of people have a perception that speedrunners or the speedrun is about ego, and it's like this super competitive space where we're all at each other, we're all trying to break each other's records, right? Maybe it was like that very early on 10 years ago, but that's just not the case. So it's very community based. Everyone is helping each other achieve their scores, even or their speed runs, even if it's breaking their, like, if somebody came to me and had a bunch of questions about one of my scores and wanted to go after it, I would be more than open to help them and try to get them to where they want to be, because it's about personal fulfillment and personal goals, right? So I'm not telling you I have all these records to boast, or I have some ego about how good I am on the console. I only have all these things because I dedicated my life to doing that, right? It's the same person, same in any other field, right? So I just wanted to point that out. So I have there's not like a console or ranking of who's the best at NES or whatever the case is, right? I am trying to get to the top of Twin Galaxies, yes, but that's because Tom is up there, and I want to see where I rank against Tom, and I'm friends with Tom, and we talk about it all the time. So it's not an ego thing. It's just a fun thing to do.
Yeah, and I have one record, and I told you, but
Oh yeah,
I shot the video, by the way, so I need to submit it to Twin Galaxies. But
heck yeah.
just so you guys know, I took there's actually a good LGN game out there, and it's in my opinion, TNC Surf Design Wood and Water Rage, which I can max out on Wood and Water Rage, which is when you play both the skateboarding and the surfing back to back. And I've maxed the score out. I did submit, but I failed on my submission because I didn't realize you can't pause on a world record run, and also I didn't show myself putting the cartridge into the NES as proof that I wasn't like showing some fake video. So I am really proud of that. It's really the only game that I feel connected to a high score, and I'm proud of it. And if I get that video submitted, Steve, I'll be the sixth person to ever submit for max out score on Twin Galaxies. And I think one of the scores there isn't even a max out. It's like 200,000 score or something. So
Heck yeah.
I love the idea of Twin Galaxies. I think what Walter Day did in a very early time was really important to like early, and I don't want to compare it to esports in a sense, but just early competitive gaming, and where you're trying to figure out who's the best at high score. And I think it's a very collaborative community. I think there's a lot of love involved in that, and I think that you hit a couple of important notes there. And yeah, Biff says, or the love of beautiful women. Just kidding. That will crush your dreams. Okay, Biff.
They don't test for performance enhancing drugs. No.
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 Sorry, buddy. But I did want to just walk through on the back end here, Steven. It's been awesome. I know we talk off here and have a great time shooting the shit anyway. So
Yeah,
it's really
totally.
nice to have you on the show, giving us some background on the magazine and stuff. But
Heck yeah.
let's see what the world thinks of their connection to video game magazines. And Video Game Library says, "This was the first magazine I ever bought with my own money. It sort of got out of control from there." And that's GamePro. And he shows a picture of all of his video game magazines. Wow, nice collection. Then we got Nerdy Chef says, "PC Gamer. Still remember this cover and the release of Duke Nukem Forever until it was shelved for 15 years." Nintendo Power EGM, Game Pro, and Game Fan. I had subscriptions. Had a subscription to Game Players, Game Pro, Nintendo Power for a bit. Sometimes would get some stragglers off the shelf, like EGM or Game Fan. I somehow, Identity Theft says, "I somehow acquired a few as a kid. I'm pretty sure through the mail, just don't remember how. I didn't think I had ties yet to GameStop, Electronics Boutique, but maybe I did, and I just don't remember. Love seeing previews for upcoming games and reviews from others I wanted." That's a cool story. I didn't have one. They didn't exist in my life. Another guy building our tech says Nintendo powered. My mom got me a subscription after I begged, in quotes, he put, her to also get me the Game Pro Electronic Gaming Monthly. Were also very much a part of my childhood. Restart says love demos and posters. And I think Biff mentioned demo discs, which were part of that. I still have dozens of them. My favorites are the Gears, and the Halo original drops. Let's do one more here. Black Throne says, "Goddamn, love them. Love the sight of them. Love the smell of them. Loved reading and rereading them over and over. Was always curious who these mystical people were behind these wonderful magazines." That is the best. I love that comment. That is really cool. Thanks, Black Throne, for that. And then finally, we'll do one more. I see another free demo disc. I won a Nintendo Power raffle when I was 13, so that was cool. But yeah, as you can see here, Steve, what does this tell you? Just like how much people really, there's still a need for this, in my opinion, just from all the nostalgia based around it, you know?
Yeah, and guys, there's tons of, for those of you who don't know, there's tons of great magazines out there that have variety like those old magazines. Nintendo Force magazine, really great magazine. Old School Gamer magazine. I think Retro magazine is stopped producing stuff, but they're getting sold to another company that's going to start producing. There's Retro Gamer from the UK. There's tons. There's a Cool Shit magazine. There's tons and tons and tons of magazines out there. So the difference between those and our magazine is that our magazine is NES. It's the only platform.
NES and only NES.
Yeah, pretty much like 98%, right? So it's the only platform that a lot of these creators, whatever they're creating, music, artwork, programming, they're previously created any of those things, speedrunning, high scores, tons and tons of category, food, toys, marketing licenses, movies, whatever. This is the only platform they have for this NES. So you're going to get exclusive content, and it's going to be the most comprehensive stuff that's available because we have the best experts working on it.
I love it. So yeah, let's close out on that. Like, what are you looking for in the future for NES Pro? What is NES Pro? Where's your vision for this in the future? Like, what is your dream here with this whole project?
As the publisher of this magazine, my goal is to not fall to the wayside like a lot of other magazines have. I mean, there's been at least 20 or 30 over the last 5 to 10 years that have failed. So my goal as the publisher is to keep it afloat and keep us producing the magazine for a very, very long time. And so part of that is the business aspect of it, is making sure that we keep costs low, and we're keeping the price point of the magazine in a place where people can still afford to buy it, and we're not jacking the price up. But we need more subscribers, guys. We need to get to, we had almost 200 backers, which is fantastic, and that's going to fuel our first year and a half of the magazine as far as like traveling to conventions and stuff. But we need a lot more backers to sustain long term than 200. So consider supporting even digitally. It helps.
Yeah, and I will make sure to share all that info as well. And I think we have the Nightbot going. Genzo, I'm not sure what the command was for it, but we definitely had your links running here, and I'll make sure to add it to the VOD on YouTube so that people could check it out on the description. But
very cool.
Yeah, Steve, did you have fun in the Cafe, by the way, podcast?
Always. I'll talk. Anytime I get to talk about NES, I'm having fun.
I agree. And there it is. Genzo has linked Steve's stuff there. You'll see his website, the Kickstarter is there, and also his wonderful Twitter. And Genzo, can you ban those two people that just wrote some spam in chat? That doesn't look like real people. Those look like bots.
Man, I want to click on that.
Don't do it. But yeah, I do want to say, Steve, big thank you, man. And yeah, please, everyone, feel free to definitely check out the Kickstarter. And also, I will keep things posted here on the podcast and also on my Twitter. And if you're not a part of our retro community, we do have this awesome, and I know, Steve, you're part of it. It only started a few months ago, and it's been phenomenal. We're at over 1,200 members. And I will be sharing when you guys launch the stuff in there. We're going to share this episode in there. But if you aren't a part of it, click my Twitter, hit the pinned tweet above, and join our retro community. Steve's a part of it, and people like Steve are kind of the people like we want to bring in here and support. And it's a place to support all your retro content, whether you're a streamer or doing stuff like Steve here. Come on in and join us and be a part of it. I also asked the question in the retro community, what is your favorite video game magazine as a kid? and a lot of people have commented as well. EGM, Nintendo Power, whatnot, what here. But Steve, I do want to thank you again, and please check out everything on his Twitter links and wherever you find social media. He's there, except for Instagram, I think.
Yeah. Just go support the magazine. If you love the NES and you want to, this is new stuff, right? So it's not going to be just generic game reviews like you've seen before. So if you love the NES and you want to hear about cool things, please go support the magazine.
Yes, please do it. And when I do share this, and I want to thank everyone that came on the live today, and especially everyone on VOD. Don't forget, I know you're watching too, and I really appreciate it. We kicked off my YouTube over a couple of months ago, finally, to give another place to watch the show besides just seeing it on Twitch. So really appreciate all the subscribers there. All my social links are below. Steve's stuff is there in chat. And we look forward to having a great weekend, right, Steve? Let's have a great weekend.
Yeah, I'm going on a little mini vacation after this to celebrate the Kickstarter success, and then when I get back, we're going back to work. So,
all right, and let's keep we'll keep you all updated on the show too. When Steve has updates with the NES Pro, I'll be sure to share it. Want to thank everyone as well again, and remember, we only get one shot at this, so be nice to people. I'm Andy. That's Steve. We'll see you next time on Cafe BTW, a morning gaming podcast. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.